There's a reason that half of his cabinet is not supporting him. And I think that when you look at these comments from his own former chief of staff, John Kelly, look, this is someone who is handpicked to be his chief of staff, recommended by Senator Tom Cotton. He's a retired decorated general and a Gold Star father. I think everyone at this table would agree that he's a good and honorable man. But he saw firsthand, up close and personal, what kind of leader that Donald Trump was. And now, 2 weeks before the election, he's seeing the writing on the wall and is afraid that we are heading toward re-electing Donald Trump and putting him back in power. So I think him speaking out is really powerful. And to describe your own former boss as a fascist and say that he has no regard for the Constitution, to say that he would operate like a dictator if we let him, I think that the American people need to listen to this and take his words very seriously, because this is someone who saw him in the Situation Room, decision making, and is saying that this guy is a danger.
I mean, David Urban, you served as well. You went to West Point. Yeah. You understand the gravity of this coming from military officers.
And I know,
right?
and I happen to know Mark Milley very well. I know John Kelly. I knew John Kelly when he was Southcom commander.
I mean, I understand that you support Donald Trump, but I wonder, just looking at this from the outside, why would two former military officers who really have absolutely nothing to gain from this kind of commentary, why would they say something like this if they didn't believe that it was true?
So you know, to be fair, John Kelly was asked, they read the dictionary definition, and he asked him, does he fit in that definition? Yeah. And that was John Kelly's answer. So it was a little bit of a, you know, does he fit in this definition? It wasn't volunteered. He didn't call up Jeff Goldberg and say, hey, Jeff, let me tell you something here. You know,
actually, do you mind if I play it?
No, play it. Yeah, play it again.
This is in the New York Times. Yeah, this is the audio. This is what he says.
Well, I'm looking at the definition of fascism. It's a far-right, authoritarian, ultra-nationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kind of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America.
Right. So he was asked the definition. He read the definition and he volunteered.
He reads the definition.
Absolutely.
So he's not coming off the cuff. He's been thinking about this.
Yeah. Look, I have a great deal of admiration for both John Kelly and Mark Milley. I think, as Sarah said, I think they're good people. But you know, they're entitled to their opinions. I could give you a long laundry list of other military officers who feel differently, who served with President Trump, who served in the military, who feel completely differently about the president. They're entitled to their opinions. It's the great thing about America. They could say their piece, and they get one vote on Election Day. So, you know, have at it. I think it's somewhat interesting that it appears, 14 days, 13 days before an election, as opposed to, you know,
this is the time when Americans are tuning in, though. So he's trying to make his comments, I think, have the most impact. And I would argue, too, like,
Sarah, why? He could have said it when he left, the day he left.
But the other military leaders who served with him, who you're talking about, who are supporting him and saw him up close and personal, did anyone else spend as much time with Donald Trump as John Kelly? Because I would argue that probably no one spent as much time with him as he did.
Right.
And so I think that his account actually probably matters more than some of those other folks, because he saw him so much.
People will say, the natural question is, if John Kelly thought so poorly of Donald Trump, why did he stay so long?
Because I think
why did he not resign?
I think in the coming from the military perspective, and you probably can speak on this better than I can and have an understanding of it, I think he didn't want to have to come forward because he didn't want to have to disparage a U.S. president. But he has seen that we are heading in that direction, where it is very real that Donald Trump will be put back in the Oval Office. And so he felt a duty to come forward, even if it conflicts with maybe his military values and trying to keep these things separate. But I think that he felt obligated to come forward because he loves this country and is worried about this.
I have no doubt of John Kelly's patriotism, Mark Milley's patriotism, not questioning that at all.
He also talks, I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit as the show goes on, but he does talk about Trump saying something recently that actually precipitated him speaking out. One of the other eye-popping things in both the New York Times and in The Atlantic is John Kelly talking about Trump repeatedly talking to him about Hitler. And saying that he commented more than once, or actually this is in the New York Times sound, we have it, let's play that.
He commented more than once that, you know, that Hitler did some good things too. First of all, you should never say that. But if you knew what Hitler was all about from the beginning to the end,
everything he did was in support of his racist, fascist life, philosophy, so that nothing he did you could argue was good. It was certainly not done for the right reason.
I think, first of all, I don't know John Kelly, but I agree. I think he's an honorable person. His family and his son certainly made the ultimate sacrifice for the country, so he certainly earned an opinion here. And he's earned a political opinion, but I think, like everything else with Donald Trump, opinions vary, whether you're coming out of the military or the private sector or government or anything else. And I agree that 2 weeks before an election will cause some people to look at this in a jaundiced way, like, you're trying to drop this here at the end, and there will be people who don't believe it, there will be people who refute it, and Donald Trump himself also refutes it. I would just humbly submit to Mr. Kelly that if he's worried about Hitler and he's worried about fascism, he ought to pick up the newspaper. There's thousands of Hitlers running around this country right now, running around college campuses, running around New York City, chasing Jewish people around, blocking their access on college campuses. If you're worried about Hitler and you're talking about Donald Trump, maybe open your eyes and take in what's happening on the American left in this country. Those are the Hitlers I'm worried about.
I'll let Bakari address this, but I also want to keep on the subject that we're talking about.
Let me also just respectfully say that I don't even agree with many of the protests that are going on college campuses, but it's more than far. The line has been crossed. You are over there, and the line is behind you. To compare college students who are protesting for Palestinian rights to Adolf Hitler.
They're literally chasing the Jewish students around UCLA and blocking their access.
There aren't
From the river to the sea doesn't mean let's cooperate.
There aren't many more pro-Israel Democrats that you will find than myself. And so I hear you, and I understand that their anti-Semitism needs to be rooted out. But what I'm also saying is that your comment was way far beyond the pale. But I want to go back to John Kelly. I want to go back to John Kelly for a second, because all of you all have humbly come to John Kelly and say that we agree with what you said. But I want you to close your eyes for a second and imagine if anybody dare say that Kamala Harris praised Adolf Hitler. Imagine if anybody dare say that Kamala Harris was a fascist. Imagine if anybody dare say Kamala Harris believed in authoritarianism. Just think about Kamala Harris is having to run the 110 hurdles with high heels on and do a backflip at the end and land a perfect somersault in order to just be in the race with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump gets to have his former chief of staff say that he was a communist, say that he was an authoritarian, a fascist, and praise Adolf Hitler. And Republicans in this country sit here and sit on their hands. And so, yes, you know what's crazy? I don't necessarily agree with all the college protests either, Scott.
They're not just in college, by the way. There's plenty of non-college, too.
That's fine, and that's all good and dandy. But what's also crazy, what we're saying is we're agreeing on that, and we can agree on that. And me and you, we can go out on these college campuses and have those discussions. And Ashley may disagree with me on that, and that's fine. That is what happens at this table with Abby Phillip. But the most amazing thing is that Donald Trump is the only man I know who can have David Urban and Scott Jennings and other Republicans, when someone praises Adolf Hitler, simply say,
he says it didn't happen.
No.
I'm sorry.
Bakari, hold on. Not cross that line. Okay, because because I'm not saying that praising Adolf Hitler is a good thing. Scott's not saying praising Adolf Hitler is a good thing. Neither of us are saying that. So
we're not saying that. What we are saying, let me be clear. Because I want to be clear with you. Because both of us are friends, so I want to be extremely clear. What I am saying, though, is that you're in a pretzel right now because there is someone, back this up. If Kamala Harris, if there was anybody, Maya Harris or Tony West or David Plouffe or anybody else came out and said, Kamala Harris praised Adolf Hitler, how would you be right now?
I would be, that's a bad thing to say, right? I would say it's a terrible thing to say, right? Yes. But I guarantee you that Kamala Harris' team would say she didn't say it, just as what's happening now. And the same thing's happened. So that's why people in America don't believe half this stuff, Bakari, because it comes out, half the people say it did happen, half the people say it didn't happen, and everyone's left 14 days from the election shrugging their shoulders saying, white noise.